Hi there. We're in Nelson Barbour, Charles Taze Russell, Three Worlds, Plan of Redemption, page 81. Barbour is laboriously going through why the 7 times is a legitimate inference from Daniel chapter 4, but also from Leviticus chapter 26. Barbour says 7 prophetic years, a day for a year, represent 2,520 years. The authority for using a day to represent a year comes from God himself. That is, he has made the application. We talked last time about the fact that really he only gives us permission to do that in Numbers 14 and in Ezekiel 4. All the others are our interpretation. God himself, he has made the application. The Bible teaches truths not directly, but by parables, dark sayings, and symbols. For instance, we are informed in Daniel 7 that a horn, when used as a symbol, represents a kingdom. Now, if I find a beast used as a symbol in the Bible, having 2 or more horns, I have the right to assume that those horns represent kingdoms, although in that particular case it might not be so stated. I grant you that one who chooses to oppose and is only desirous of pulling down and is not searching for light has the privilege of demurring and saying, as it does not say in this special case, that this horn means a kingdom. He will not accept of the application. But I care nothing for that man or his opinion. I have found a Bible precedent for such an interpretation and choose to accept it. Others will do as they please. Now, I can produce a God-given precedent for making a day stand for a year when it is associated with symbols. A symbol is anything used to represent another thing, no matter whether it be a beast, a picture, a type, or a parable. The particular case to which I now refer may be found in Ezekiel 4, 1-8, in which case the time used to measure the symbol is itself symbolic, and each day, in such a case, represents a year. I do not expect, nor do I desire to prove anything from the Bible in such a way as to convince a man against his will. God himself does not undertake such a work. When, in the book of Daniel or the Revelator, I find time used to measure symbols, whether it be a woman, a horn, a beast, or any other thing, I have the right, from one God-given precedent, to assume that the time itself is symbolic, and if so, that a day represents a year. Then, if the facts of the case demand such an application, I'm fully warranted in accepting it. So there's Barbour's rule of interpretation. I have the precedent. And if I have the precedent in one place, I can apply it in another place in the Bible without explicit permission. And having established that, we're on our road, on the road to chronological disaster, of course, and we're at the mercy of the imagination of Nelson Barbour and Charles Taze Russell and all other interpreters who are not paying attention to what the commentaries on Daniel are saying, or Revelation. Barbour goes on that the 70 weeks or 77s in Daniel 9:24 represent that many years. The facts in relation to the coming of the Messiah clearly support. Well, he's right in this case. But again, the inference that the vision of Daniel 8, which is called the vision of the evening and the morning, verse 26, or the vision of the days, giving it the same rendering as in verse 14, that is, until 2,300 days, Hebrew evening mornings, C margin of the Hebrew text, that is, means a day for a year, is self-evident. And again, the commentaries on Daniel do not assume that 2,300 days or evening mornings in Daniel chapter 8 has self-evidently got a larger application to a period of 2,300 years. But the Adventist movement assumed that, and so do Barbour and Russell. The vision embraces 3 empires, Medo-Persian, Greece, and Rome, and is called the vision of the days. The Hebrew word here is bokar, and is the same in verses 14 and 26. And Daniel called it the vision of the bokar, and when asked how long the vision, the saint answers, until 2,300 days, and a little something to follow, that is, the cleansing of the sanctuary. And this we know, that a little more than 6 literal years bears no proportion to the duration of what the vision embraces. And as the time there is used to measure symbols, unity demands that the time should be symbolic also. 30 days in the Bible is the Bible measure for 1 month. The fountains of the great deep were broken. This is according to Genesis 7 and 8. The fountains of the great deep were broken up on the 17th day of the 2nd month, and the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. And the ark rested in the 7th month on the 17th day. And this 150 days was exactly 5 months, 30 days to the month. And in Revelation 12, the woman, that is the church, fled into the wilderness for 1260 days in verse 6. And in verse 14, it is called a time, a times, and half a time. And in Revelation 13, verse 5, the power from which she suffered had power to continue 42 months. 42 months are 3.5 years, or times, and 42 times 30 are 1260. Hence, as 3.5 times represent 1260 years, so 7 times represent twice 1260, or 2520 years. And that's still the logic they're following, and still using the same basic text, foundational text, that is Daniel chapter 4, to excuse all. So again, how many commentaries on Daniel and Revelation at the time when Barbour and Russell were writing this book agreed with this assumption that the 2300 days, meaning years, is self-evident. Seventh-day Adventists, of course, are still clinging to this as being the time for a judgment to take place, of course, invisibly in heaven. And built upon that in Seventh-day Adventism is the idea that Ellen G. White was sent along at that time to elucidate Scripture. So a cult is built upon a chronological assumption that therefore justifies a assumption about how God is working in the world exclusively through their group. And this is exactly the logic of Barbour and Russell here, that only those having light will know these things. The rest are in darkness. Put a link into a video we did on the 2300 days back in our Daniel playlist, and also the playlist on your screen. What's wrong with this assumption that 2300 days equals 2300 years? Let's look at the text for a start. So we do that in this particular video, and the video I wanted to link for your inspection is one called something along the lines of How I Landed Softly After Leaving the Watchtower. And it was that God had given me books that were a fitting contrast to the kind of exegesis, or really eisegesis, that Russell and Barbour before him were up to here, in doing things according to their own ignorance of what was being done in Christendom around them, and then basically the assertion of their own will, this kind of statement. I have found a Bible precedent for such an interpretation and choose to accept it. Others will do as they please. The arrogance of such an assertion in the face of the fact that scholars have labored long over the text of Daniel, Ezekiel, and Revelation, long before Barbour comes along and applies this incredibly arrogant assertiveness to the text of the Holy Bible. I've found, as I tried to say in this video, that the commentators of Christendom are far more respectful of the text than what we were as Jehovah's Witnesses. And here's the root of our eisegetical habit in Nelson Barbour and Charles Russell, 1877. So, Daniel, 2300 years, question mark, and how I left the watchtower and landed softly.